evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the patio this evening. It is approximately 7 p.m. here Pacific Daylight Time, and I am very honored and grateful to introduce and let you folks have a conversation with me and Mr. Tony Schiena live from New York via Skype. Tony is an expert in counterterrorism. He's a defense contractor. He has decades of information, training, and wealth of facts that he wishes to share with us. He co-authored a short book just recently that is on the web that you can download for free. And I'm not going to do very much talking. I'm going to let Mr. Schiena give you some information, some of his knowledge and expertise in what we're dealing with right now, right here as a world. And Tony, thank you very much for taking the time out of your evening. It's 10 o'clock. I know you have a lot of moving parts in your day and every day, and just wanted to say thank you and welcome to joining us.
Thanks, Dean, and you're very welcome.
Tony, in a nutshell, without going on too long, could you tell us where you have come from over the decades of doing this for a living, from day one, coming out of high school, and being in this industry? Could you tell everybody the parallels of what we're fighting and what we're dealing with on a daily basis, and how you would advise, without a biased opinion, with a platform not being involved, whether it be in politics or otherwise, what your viewpoints are on dealing with this situation, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, coming out of the intelligence community, from the beginning, when I started out in Africa, and being aware of bioterrorism programs then, and anthrax, all the way through to Iraq and chemical weapons and biological weapons, and a few other instances, I've been quite familiar with the defensive procedures necessary with regards to fighting that type of terrorism. This is not the same thing, and it's not my place to say whether it is or it's not. That goes into an area that I'd rather not, go into. But the procedures are similar in nature, and what it's done to the planet is similar as if it was, a weaponized virus, which, again, I'm not saying it was or it wasn't. It's not my place to say that. But the procedures and what it's done to the planet is similar, and my experience comes from that, from dealing with it in Africa all the way through to Iraq with chemical weapons being used by ISIS, mustard gas and radiological weapons, to instances of poisoning, by foreign agencies, of enemies of state. And I've been quite vocal about that on the bigger networks, like, for example, the polonium poisoning in London, et cetera, et cetera. So my background, I've always touched on these type of things. This is a different animal. This is something we don't understand, or we do understand. Again, it's not my place, but this virus has the first time in at least our lifetime, just the entire world, there's no, sort of borders for this virus. There's no distinguishable enemy. So that's, in that way, it's quite unique and interesting for now, while everyone is still in the fog. But dealing with it is obviously of primary importance. Now, I'm in New York City. Yes, it's the epicenter now. Yes, I've known since the beginning it would be the epicenter because it's logic. It's New York City. The world flows in and out of New York City, and quite frankly, our borders remained open when really there should have been more stringent controls. All you needed to do was look at countries before us and what happened with those countries, whether starting from Wuhan to then Korea and further down into Europe, and Italy being the epicenter for Europe and Iran being the epicenter for that region, and see how that worked. We should have taken really more notice of what is happening there, because there wasn't procedures in place here to withstand or stop the same thing from happening. So that's why it happened here. And now it's unfortunately New York City is the epicenter, but it's by no means the end of it. It's just the beginning in America, unfortunately. And it's going to spread more and more. And from New York, it's going to spread to other places, and it's going to affect everybody. Because, I think if stringent measures were taken a month ago, 5-6 weeks ago, we could have been in a potentially different place. I know personally, because I was in China from, I think it was January 9th till the 21st. I was there. I flew in through, straight from Beijing to New York, and went through seamlessly. Thank God I didn't have corona, but if I did, I would have infected a lot of people, because I'm in touch with a lot of people in daily meetings. So I didn't, but then I left after a week and went to Argentina, where I climbed Aconcagua, which is the biggest mountain in South America. The only coming back from Argentina was I actually stopped and questioned in immigration. So, and it's not to point fingers at them then, because no one knew what it was then, and that's also not our fault. It's partially, the fault of the origin, but later on, procedures could have been taken, more stringent, and we should have been more on top of that, because now it's here. It's too late. Yes, testing needs to happen, of course, but now it's also just protecting people and making sure if we knew, and if the authorities and the government and the people responsible knew that all this was happening around the planet, make sure there's enough ventilators, make sure there's all these things. If you're going to have a border that's not as restricted as the others are, make sure these things are in place then. So when it does hit you, everything's in place. But if you don't have those things in place, then make sure your borders are stricter. So I do have a bit of an issue with that.
No, that raises a very strong question of, I guess you could say, awareness. And you've been very much an advocate when it comes to the A word of awareness in many levels of your profession, and also fighting human trafficking, as we've talked about before. Do you believe that the numbers coming out of DC and otherwise are indicative of data and facts that we're not privy to where that 100,000, 200,000 loss rate is already something that they are aware of, but we're not privy to the backstory? Or do you think that's purely an honest forecast? Do you really think we're getting those facts as they're actually happening?
I mean, I'm not. I can't constantly look at the numbers because it's just too much to handle for any given group, really. Are we getting sort of ground truth? Yes and no. I can't really attest to that. It's difficult because getting ground truth when there isn't mandatory testing, and the testing kits are not completely readily available, and they're not free, and they're not all these things, you can't get real data then. When it happened in Korea, they immediately saw what happened in Wuhan. They had free testing available immediately. They had monitoring, as in monitoring contact. Where did that contact happen? Who did that influence? And they had created apps, and through the cell phone also monitoring. And I don't expect things to be Orwellian, but those things helped when it came to tracking. It doesn't need to be as extreme as other parts of the world where it's with facial rec and everything else, and their messaging apps that they track so strictly. But that has helped contain the virus, especially in Korea, and its prime minister will immediately say, even when they try and compliment him, he goes, "I'm not out of danger. This is just something we've done to limit, the numbers." So coming back to your question, we don't know because there's not enough testing. There's not mandatory testing, and it's I'm in the gray area. I don't know if it's free or not. Sometimes I hear some hospitals are offering it for free, and then you can't get it anymore, and it's not for free. So there's a lot of unverifiable sort of data.
Sure. With that in mind, and the global, if you will, the domino, the boomerang, the resurgency, do you foresee this extending much further than just this season into next? And also with, unfortunately, the pause button on the world and millions of children being at home, and you know where we're going with this, with child predators, sex trafficking, human trafficking, on a security standpoint for millions of parents and millions of children. I know you've touched base just recently about being aware that your children are at home. They're always at home. And let's face it, most children are connected to an electronic device or a computer or some sort of gaming or social media, to where they're now doubled or tripled or quadrupled with being exposed to all of those other threats.
Yeah. How far do I see this going? I don't think it's going to go that far into next year or anything like that. I think you have principles that have been spoken about, like herd community and things like that, where it reaches a certain percentage of people and it has to die out. I think it's something that we're just all going to live with. We live with the common cold. We live with influenza. There's no vaccine for the common cold. We live with cancers. We live with AIDS. We live with many things. This is going to be another thing we're just going to live with. Okay. In the beginning, it was all about the virus doesn't kill. The mortality rate isn't that high, but it's never about that. It's about the spread rate. It's about not having the capacity to deal with the huge number of infected people that now need treatment, and that increases the death rate because the shortage of ventilators and care. That's what it's always about. And in the beginning, hearing all these opinions about don't be concerned because of the mortality rate, it's not about that. So that was really aggravating. But now people are more aware, and they finally woken up to the fact that, yes, whether you're a government or corporation or just Joe Public, that is more what it's about. And now it's the hunt to have corporations and government production acts and that in order to have factories create to build more ventilators, or whether it's Elon Musk or someone else doing that for the U.S. For the public. There's a second part of your question. What was that?
Yes, Tony, with all the children,
yes,
being counseled, across the country.
Sure. I mean, look, we've seen this 3 weeks ago already in New York. Where they had instances of people walking into a store, grabbing something, and walking out without paying for it. Okay, that's just one. And then you look at organized crime. This is a perfect time for organized crime to ply their trade and take advantage of the chaos. And they are, and that's why steps are now being taken, and by DEA and others when it comes to narco trafficking in South America and down, that type of thing. But then there's instances of domestic terrorism. I think there was one that was averted in Kansas, and that's just someone who's had his gripe or issue or whatever he has and been wanting to have his 5 minutes of fame, and deciding, well, this is the best time to do it now, right? And there's so many different things that can go wrong now. The intelligence community in general on the planet is not operating on full force. It can't, because of infection rates. There needs to be segregation so that some are protected and others not. There are corporations that form different teams. So if this team's working the other one's off, one cannot affect the other. And in in the security industry and intelligence industry, it's the same thing. So if you're not running at full capacity, there are holes and they can be taken advantage of. Cyber is a whole different thing. Cyber looting is massive and will increase exponentially through this period. It's not necessarily someone going in the store and looting it. They'll loot and hold ransom on the internet because everyone is on the internet today. We are at home, and that includes kids. And of course, kids are on the internet, and that's what you're asking me about, and internet predators. Fact, if you're a child on the internet, you will at one or other time be contacted by an online predator. That's factual. If you are on the internet, you will be contacted. So with that type of factual information, it is a concern of everyone. So yeah, children do need to be monitored on what they're doing on social networks and chat rooms right now, because that is rampant and is going to increase again exponentially through this time period. The way where I see this time period going, I've always said it's progressively seeing how it is built up, and now it's hit our shores really hard. You're looking out into July, August, for it to start maybe tapering off when more people have it. The sort of philosophy of the herd community, all of that setting in. And the fact then we'll have ventilators and we'll have more care and people will get better quicker because of it. When social distancing is very important. Social distance is not the first time we've seen social distancing. In 1918, the same thing was implemented, and that's when they had much less information than us, didn't have the internet. So social distancing, yes, and then people getting more information. Should you wear a mask? Yes, you should wear a mask. Okay, that people are understanding the Asian sort of mentality where they wear masks a lot. And, often it's because of pollution or something else. But in this case, it is a very important thing, is when you look at the way this virus is transferred, it's through droplets. And if it's transferred by a cough, it's someone in your presence. And there are sort of opinions that that'll stay in the air for up to 3 hours. But if someone sneezes or there's that transference of a droplet, that's a transference of about 1 million particles of virus compared to touching a surface, whether it's a cardboard box that I forgot the exact time period, but I think that's like 12 hours, and then steel and plastics maybe 18 hours, and these are just average type number guesstimates, but from experts. Touching that would then of particles to enter your system. That certain amount of particles opposed to 1 million particles. 1 million particles through droplets would accelerate everything. You'd have 1 million virus in you. Your symptoms would be, exacerbated. Your time period of recovery, everything, your treatment is more urgent. It becomes an emergency, and your risk is much higher. When you're touching a surface, it's much slower. Your symptoms will be slower. Everything will be slowed down. Hence, wear a mask. And it's hard for the Western world to get used to wearing a mask. We've had N95 mask there, and when I walked outside 2 weeks ago, I wore it, and it's very uncomfortable. We're not used to it, but we are in a pandemic, so get used to it if you're going to go outside. Then that's another question. Where are the supply of masks? And we've Mosaic, my company, is a crisis management company. We've gone from traditionally crisis management and security. It's just the purest form of crisis management where we've just morphed into medical too. So we've had early mornings, late nights dealing with medical supplies and trying to get sanitizer and this and that. So the supply of this is very important also. And of course, ventilators is very important, and at least the production acts are going to help with that. So I think coming 2 months, we'll have everything in place. You will have the medical staff, the ventilators, people will be wearing masks, the social distancing. And if social distancing is not applied now, rules will be more strict. It'll become like other parts of the planet. In the beginning, we were trying to, maybe 2 weeks ago, we were trying to get U.S. citizens out of Peru and Honduras. Peru locked its borders, locked its airspace, no one in, no one out. And you're not allowed out on the street. If you're driving, they'll take a license away. There's military on every corner. There are parts of the world that are treating it like that. We're a very free society, and we should remain free, but we should also remain cautious and understand social distancing is there for a reason, because this is about the spread rate, not about how dangerous the virus is. The dangerous virus because of this the virus is dangerous because of the spread rate, right? And because we're not equipped.
Right. Do you believe that the transparency of the information that we as the general public versus you, Tony, you've been doing this for, like I said, decades. You consult military agencies, law enforcement agencies, governments, not just in the U.S. Your resume is not just in the U.S. And I'm not trying to pump up your CV or give you a pat on the back of what you've done, but what you've done does speak for your expertise and the level of information and intelligence that you possess in the world of what's factual, what's happening, and what is bled through, if you will, to the general population. Do you feel that we're getting all the accuracy of information that we deserve or need?
I mean, we're in a time of mass information, misinformation, disinformation. It is a fog of information. We put out every 3 days a bulletin to our clients that sort of try and distill that information to what's most credible. And then we just kind of open that up, and we just put it out on, whoever wants it, because it's important that people can get distilled information that's more accurate, right? This is an information war. We're in that time period. We have the internet, right? The internet has been good for many things, but it's also perpetuated this, where so much can be fed out, and people can be so disinformed because of propaganda and agendas. Are we getting all the most factual information? Probably not. Are people, covering up their indecisions? Yes, they are. I mean, all these things are apparent when you understand the importance of the information and how easily it's manipulated. I think as we're moving on now, we're getting to times where there's more credible information. We witnessed Governor Cuomo on TV, his information and the way that he tries to inform people, not only in New York and America, is that his information is based on pure hard fact that is not influenced. This is all he knows. He doesn't know everything, but these are the numbers he's getting from these credible sources, and this is what he's giving us. I like what he says. I've never really followed him at all. I like what he says. It's made me a kind of a fan of him.
Sure.
And he seems like a very strong individual who's just giving you as much ground truth as he could possibly get. Is he giving us everything? I don't know. I'm not my place to go into that either. You go down a whole different rabbit hole. But
Sure.
I think we're getting more credible information as it goes along. In the beginning, it was just a mass of crap. And that's why we had to distill it as much as possible.
Well, I agree with you without going into that political realm. I agree with you. I try to absorb as much information as I can, and then I distill what seems to be factual or accurate to where I can make a decision both professionally and personally, because we all have friends, we all have family, we all have people around us, whether it be a close circle or a distant circle. I think the concern for everybody is at the front of our eyes.
Mm.
And I wanted your opinion because you don't have a political stance or motivation or bias. You're not doing this because of I mean, you're monetarily already going down the highway with Mosaic. You're already doing the nonprofit with human slavery. Uh, so this was not a platform that I wanted you to jump on today because you needed it. I wanted your voice to be heard because I know personally where you stand, what your resume, your influence of information and intelligence comes from. And I think a lot of people would appreciate your transparency, just as Governor Cuomo is giving to his people, his family, his constituents. It's important because I have a level of confidence in certain people that make my decisions every day a little bit easier. And I appreciate you taking the time. I know there's people that know who you are that appreciate your transparency. You don't have time for BS. You travel the world doing your job because that's in your blood. You're the shark in the ocean that keeps moving, uh, doing something that you love to do with passion. And I do honestly appreciate your opinions and respect the influence that you've given to some of the people that are watching or listening. And we just want some information and want an outcome that we can deal with today and maybe next week and following, in the months to come. So I do appreciate that very much, Tony.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Dean.
You're welcome. And as far as you and your health and safety and your family, on behalf of my family and the circle of my friends that know who you are, we do honestly, sincerely, wholeheartedly wish you the best safety and health. And I'm hoping that the reshuffling of this deck will last after the crisis.
Yeah.
Everyone's on their best behavior during the crisis, but I was hoping that maybe after the crisis, when everything is calm, people will remember how much we really do need each other.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. There's a plus to technology in a time like this where I had a FaceTime with my whole family today, and there's split screen of four, and even my mother is sitting in Italy that's late 70s and being able to partake in this technological miracle where four of us from different parts of the planet all joined on one screen and enjoying and laughing as if you're sitting in your own living room. So it's brought obviously people together and made you reassess a few things. But it's a battle to get through. There's especially in the US and the world, Italy's still battling like crazy, but a month, 2 months, 3 months to really, I think in the US at least, we know that when the government wakes up, it wakes up. Like when it wakes up, there is a force, there is a entire sort of structure behind it that reacts very quickly, and that's where we are now. There's reaction, which is a good thing.
Yeah,
and that's why I believe maybe 2 months, 3 months, we'll have it nipped in the butt, and the resources will be available. That Corona will be here, it'll be here, people are going to have it, but people are going to get cured very easily, whether there's a vaccine or not, because it's not again about the mortality rate, it's the spread rate and the incapacity. When there's capacity and we're ready for it, people get healed a lot quicker, and we won't have this problem just like the other diseases we live with. And I expect that a month or two, we're sitting in April, May, coming to June, I suspect we'll start being okay, unless it's people don't abide by what's been expected from them, and that is staying home and social distancing and going out and wearing a mask and not doing stupid things where you're spreading the virus. And it ends up, with, I said, 6 weeks ago, I had arguments with people. I've lost actual acquaintance, friendships because of it, because of the irresponsibility of people, thinking, well, it's, this is not, they're immune to it. This is not a problem. It's the flu. and and they're going home to their families, and their family consists of the grandma who's 70 years old, 80 years old, and that's now who they're going to end up killing because of their irresponsibility. So I think if we're all responsible for this and band together and just expect there's a long road of a month or two to get through this so we can go back to a semblance of normality is the most important thing right now.
No, I can't agree with you more. It's on my mind constantly, and obviously throughout everyone's minds, not just in the United States, but globally. Obviously, we hear more from the social stream networks that are in our communities and state and federal and nationally. But when it comes to globally, it's important because, as you just mentioned, you have family abroad, and how ironic that of the two major epicenters and areas of the world, you can speak for both of them. And so that's another reason why I invited you, because you had no reason to sugarcoat or camouflage any of the facts, the data, or information. You were at ground zero of both locations.
Yeah, it was pointed out where I really had to think about it because I came out of China in their part of January, which really is the start of it all, and then end up in New York. It's now an epicenter, and my family's in Italy. So it's just been kind of from January, end of January, really been submersed in this and trying to understand it. So yeah.
Well, again, I will thank you probably 3 million times till the end of this century for taking the time. I really appreciate you giving your aspects and information, because we need that just as much as CNN or Headline News or Fox. We need someone from your sector of not just law enforcement or security or what you do, but also as a human being.
Thank you. Thanks, Dean. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Tony. I do wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Schiena, TonySchiena.com, MosaicSect.com, HumanSlavery.com is where you can find Tony, learn about what you do for a living, what you do with your clients, what you do for the world, how you advise agencies, and how you're trying to make our world a little bit better and safer in many ways. And really, Tony, I do wish you the best. And if you wish anything or need anything from this side of the country,
thank you.
You know how to reach us.
Thank you so much. You're too kind. I appreciate that.
Bet, Tony.
Thanks, Dean. Have a great night.
You too, Tony.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a wrap.